Hello class. In this video I want to show how to do the windows in elevation, and there's really nothing new to AutoCAD for drawing windows and elevation, so it'll reinforce some of the basic drawing concepts, but really it's about how to make sure that you're drawing the window technically correctly for the double hung windows. There's a few things I want to point out just to make sure you draw them correctly. So I'm going to start with the upper windows, and I'll pull up the drawing that we're drawing from. So these windows up here first, because this one's sort of obscured, so we'll get to that one second. And then I'll make some. Also, there's some general recommendations that you might get to for various things as well as we go through this. So we're going to go up here. I'm going to start with the second floor. So I'm going to pan all the way up to my second floor here. And I'm going to do, I just want to mark the edges down. I'm going to do this little trick where I'm going to draw one line just to start the edge. And it can be however long you want it to be. Just, I drew it to there. And then we're going to use copy and select that line I just drew and hit enter. I was going to copy it to each of the window edges. Here, 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 and here. And then I'm going to use the move tool there, and I'm going to select all these guidelines I just drew and move them down on top of my building so I can have the locations, the side-to-side dimensions of the window. And that's going to be the window, not the trim. We'll sort of get through there. I'm just pointing that out. So now we have to sort of set the sill and the head height. The sill height can vary. I mean, there's obviously a range that's very traditional. The head height is actually much more specific. And the two choices you really have usually in residential construction is either at 6'8" or at 7'0" for the head height for windows. And the reason for that is those are basically your choices for your head height for your doors. And it's really nice if you're inside a room and all the heads of all the elements line up. So there's really I wouldn't say there's a right or wrong answer, but in this case I'm going to set my head height as 7 feet. And so this is our floor line, so I'm going to start by offsetting that. So I'm going to offset, do 7 foot. 7 foot's the more generous, the more gracious one. So I'm going to go with that for a house. And so there's our head height there. And I can match properties if I want to sort of not make it a dotted line, if that is a little confusing here. So I'll select the green line there and that green line there just to get it so it's maybe it's a little more clear. You don't have. And for the sill height, you have more choices in the range. I'd say it ranges around 2 feet, 3 feet high is where it's typical sill height. So if I were to sort of go an average, I'd say 2'6". So I'm going to use 2'6" as my sill height for this window. So I'm going to go to offset again and do 2 foot 6 inches and hit enter and offset that line to get my sill height. And just for clarity's sake, I'll match properties and turn it into a green line. And we can already see the 3 windows are actually outlined already. Right now, actually, I'm just going to draw one window because once I've drawn one, I can copy and reuse it or edit it as needed. So I'm going to start with this left one here, and I'm just going to do fillet, and I'll just do the full square here, fillet here. I'm going to hit enter to keep going fillet. Select these 2 lines, and that is my opening of that window. So now this is really the edge of the window. It's inside the trim, but on the outside edge of the window, and that really is an edge. So I'm going to keep green as the layer because I think that's a good mid layer. And I'll probably reduce line weight color on each side of this. So I'm going to draw the window itself. I'm going to say it's 2 inches wide. So I'm going to go to offset. I'm going to type in 2, enter, and I'm just going to go all the way around this thing to show the window here, and I'm going to hit enter to end it, and then go. Oops! I'm going to go to fillet these corners all together. Select here and here, here to here, here to there. So that's basically the window now. Of course, this window is a double hung window, so I'm going to have an upper sash and a lower sash, and I have to draw that piece halfway in between. And I'm going to start by drawing it just from the midpoint. I'm snapping to the midpoint here. I'm going to draw across. Now this is where the key technicality comes in. And of course, this thickness is also going to be 2 inches. So I'm going to offset 2 inches. and I'm going to offset down. Now, this needs to be evenly spaced between the window. Right now it's not, because this was the midpoint, so we're too far down. There's a number of ways I could get that, but one way, because of the way I've drawn it, is I'm just going to move these two lines and press enter, click any old base point, and move it straight up 1 inch. Right, because I offset it down 2 inches, so if I move it up, it'll be the halfway mark. And if I snap my line, you don't have to do this. If I snap my line, I can prove it by showing the midpoint dot is indeed halfway through that top of the sash. Now the thing is, if you look at your drawing, I'll just pull the drawing up and zoom in a little bit here. If you look at the drawing, you can see there's an upper sash and there's a lower sash, and how this mid line comes together and how it's filled together is really important for a window. And for a double hung window, the upper sash is outside of the lower sash, and so we have to trim and fill it to make it have this shape. And the reason for that is because you can imagine water is often shed by gravity, right? And so if water or rain is hitting this thing, it runs down and just there's a it can fall down out of the window, and it can be pretty watertight. If the sashes were the other way around and you drew the bottom sash in front of the top sash, rain would come in and collect on that shelf you created, which would inherently be a gap between those sashes, and then water could get inside the building. So I will be checking for this. It's very important that the upper sash is shown as the outside sash, so it's going to look just like this. And so once you're at this sort of halfway point like I've created, it just means I have to extend the bottom line. So I'm going to press extend, then hit enter, and extend the bottom line to each side. And then I'm going to trim. I'm going to hit trim button, hit enter, these two little lines here to make it look like the inside sash is, the upper sash is outside, and the geometry is all set up right. Of course, if you're drawing a section or the internal elevation, the opposite is going to be true, and we'll look at that in upcoming assignments. So now, this drawing has subdivisions in these windows. I'm not exactly sure, quite honestly. I didn't draw this original drawing here with these single lines. So usually I don't like using single lines in AutoCAD because they mean anything has real thickness, so I don't like using lines. But that's what this drawing shows, so I'm just going to draw a line from the midpoint of that sash down that way, just as an example drawing shows, and then do the same thing on the lower part. And then after that I have to do the outside trim, and I'm going to call that 4 inches. So I'm just going to go to offset and type in 4, enter, and offset to the outside of that line 4 inches. Just like this. And once it's all offset on all 4 sides, I'll hit enter to end it, and then fill it. Command to fill it this. So fill it those 2 lines, hit enter, fill it, fill it, fill it, fill it. And then I'm going to set some layers here. So the only line I want to be green are the darker part. So obviously green is lighter than this cyan blue color because it's internal of that, but yet this is still an edge of the window. Physically, that's sort of the main opening of the window, is this line, the first one that I drew. And so I want to keep that darker than anything else. So all this stuff to the inside of that line, which is going to be all this stuff, I'm just going to select it and then turn it 1 shade lighter by going to color 2, yellow, and I'm going to select all the edge of this trim here and also do the same, set it to color 2, yellow, and I've sort of finished that window. This window is easy because I can just copy that. So I'm just going to copy, select this whole thing really quick, hit enter, and then again, remember the important line is the green line. So I'm going to select the corner of the green line and just snap right over to the guidelines I've drawn, and it's the same window size. Or if yours isn't, you might consider making it such. I'm going to talk about that at the end of the video, some decisions you might make. If not, you might have to stretch the window a little bit. And then I'm going to do the same for the next one. So I'm going to copy this again and stretch over here, and from that same corner to the same edge. Now, one of the things, if you're paying close attention to, the width might be the same as is the case, but in our example drawing, they actually have this window higher because I think this is a bathroom behind it. So we haven't put the things in the bath, but really many things might be behind it that you want to go higher on. So I'm going to call this sill 3-2 up. So I'm going to go offset 3 foot 2, enter. Take the floor line and push it up here. Hit enter to end it. Then I'm going to use my stretch command, which is going to be this one right here. I'm going to click it. I'm going to draw the box as you see it. It's got to be sort of right to left from the zone that you see it on screen. And hit enter. And then I'm going to go from this lower corner up to this line here. And I might just take some time here and erase some of these guidelines I don't need, so I no longer need that. In fact, I don't need these anymore either because I've set up those guidelines as well. Of course, now the one thing we can see is this sash now still has to be halfway through the window, and because I only stretch up the bottom, it's not. So I'm going to draw another guideline from the midpoint of this green line. That's going to be the midpoint of the window. And I could do this a number of different ways I'm thinking in my head, and I think for this I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to stretch, which is right here. I'm going to draw a window from right to left, similar to what I have there, just to get that middle sash, and press enter. And I'm going to take the top part of this and move it to here. And again, I got to get the center to here. I just temporarily made that move, and I'm going to do stretch again, sort of doing this window, hit enter, and I'm going to just come up and just type in 1 enter to put it halfway through the line. Now my guideline got crooked. That's not a problem. I'm going to erase that right now. Hit and erase and hit enter. If I select my green line, we can see that the midpoint dot is right in the middle of that window. So I've sort of rescaled that window in that way. Now if we look at the drawing, whoop, that's the wrong one. We'll get to this one in a few minutes. Come on. Come off screen. There we go. Let's see. Where is my drawing? There we go. If we look at this drawing, I'll zoom out a little bit. See, we got a window down here and a window over here. Well, I might as well, let me go to this window really quick because it's really just the same window as the other ones up here. I just have to get the correct location. So this might be a little boring, but I'm going to go back up here. And I could have done this earlier, but I'm going to draw a line. In fact, I know that I made these windows the same size, so I only need to find one edge because I already have the windows determined. So I'm just going to pull this line all the way down to there, and I'm going to come here and copy this window. That was my main window to copy from, and again it is this line, this green line. That's the important one that lines up, and I'm going to pull it right over. And since I knew the window is the same size, if I got this line correct, then I don't know by default I must have that line correct. So I'll erase this guideline here, and but the one thing is, this is set back, right? So this is cyan. This is a green line because this wall is set back. So I should do the same things here, that all this stuff should be back a line weight. So I'm going to select all of this stuff, and I'm going to change it to the lightest line weight here, which is color 01, and put it on red. And that was just a quick way to change everything. But this main window edge, I still probably want a slightly thicker line weight. So I'm just going to come back and select these 4 lines and then turn it down to color 2. So it's one step below the ones that's sort of on this front plane. That easy, and we have it there. All right, now I'm going to show you this window down here on the first floor, which is the last window in this elevation. It's all going to be very similarly, although I think there might be some tips that I want to mention as we go do this. So I'm going to draw a line, and just to draw a guideline, and just for demonstration purposes, I'm actually going to pull this all the way down, or pretty low down. I'm going to do that on one side. I'm going to do this on the other side as well. I could copy that line if I wanted to, but I'm going to do it this way. We can see that the window is going to sit with this column which is in front, so we're going to have to actually clean that out of the window. But the other thing I want to note, which is why I drew these guidelines this way, which is slightly different than I did before, is that notice that the first floor window that's going to be down here is perfectly aligned with the window above it, and that is very typical in almost all of architecture. And if it's not, it's usually for some, if it's a well-designed building, it's for some other patterned reason for not doing that. So that's really what makes a good building from a bad building in many cases, is that you think about these alignments. So if your windows in plan, you might have been thinking that in plan, but if your windows were not aligning like this in plan, you might want to go and make that change now, because that's the way it's supposed to be. And it's not that you just make the change in the elevation, which you should go and do because you want to make this building look good and you want to document it, and you might even have it in your portfolio and other such things like that. But just like in the real world, you need to go back and change your plan to make that work. So if the second floor needs to change, or the first floor needs to change, or whatever one you think needs to change, maybe both of them, you should go and do that. In the real world, you're always going back. We're giving you a lot of details. But as you're doing something without looking at a PDF of the finished work, you draw a plan, you draw an elevation, you realize, oh, I should have done this, go back and adjust the plan, and in plan you realize you should do something in elevation, and back and forth and back and forth. So don't be afraid, if you want to adjust your windows for alignments, to go ahead and do that. That said, I don't care too much about these plans. These are our guides, although you might change those. They're blocks. They're harder to do. These are the plans, your real ones over here. that should be changed. So keep that in mind. So we're gonna take this window here. Now this is the kitchen behind here, if we remember. So a kitchen's gonna have cabinets behind it, so we don't want low sills again. We want sort of a high sill, just like we end up in a bathroom. So it's actually this window I'm gonna copy, and it's the same width. It's gonna have the same sill and head height. So I'll be good to go. Just copy this. So I'm gonna offset either the sill or head. I'll do head. So I'm gonna offset 7 foot for the same sort of head height. And I'll offset that from this porch edge is also going to be the first floor line. And then I'm going to go to copy, and I'll copy all of this guy and hit enter. I'm going to select this top left corner of the green line because that's the important one, and match it up where the two guidelines I made, this cyan one's the floor and then the ones for the windows coming down, and I'll erase all my guidelines to show where it is. Now again, the column of the porch is in front of the window. Right now they all sort of smush together. What that really means is I have to trim out all this information inside the porch. And so I can erase some lines, like you might try to trace these vertical lines, but they won't trim because they're all completely inside the column. So there's nothing to trim. So we have to erase those. But then after we do that, we can use trim. So I'm going to come up, hit my trim button, hit enter. And then just select these lines one by one, or just do a window right through them all, and you'll have your window just like that. So there's all your windows in this elevation. It's coming along quite nicely. I'll follow this video, I think, with one for a lot of other things, including the hatches for the siding, railing, and stuff like that. And then we'll talk about notes and finishing this up. So keep going.